Okay, y'all. Let me welcome y'all. Thanks for being here this morning. So we've got about 1,300 people registered for the Social Media Summit, and as many of you know, because you've been repeat attenders. This is our third year having a summit. We're going to do these every year. They're 2 days. We pick a topic that's important to the community, and we educate and inform in a way that where professionals and law enforcement can benefit, where everyday Arkansans, regardless of your occupation, can benefit, where parents can benefit. And so the first year, if you'll remember, 23 was human trafficking. Last year was cybersecurity. This year, Social Media Summit. Next year, it's going to be what every Arkansan should know about the foods you eat and the products that you apply to your body. We're going to be talking about all sorts of stuff. What do you need to know about microplastics, and what do you need to know about food additives and the good, the bad, and the ugly. We're going to have experts talking about all that. That's going to be a big, big deal. And that'll be a year from now. So just wanted to let you know that. Some housekeeping. So in the past, you may remember we were downstairs, concrete floor, cavernous, sound not as good. We were there because of the numbers. And I said, well, it's better to pack this room with better sound and have people stand in the back than it is to be using the concrete floor. So all of the sessions will be in this room, except lunch today will be in the Marriott, upstairs, the elevator at the Marriott, and the breakouts tomorrow will be upstairs at the Marriott. But otherwise, we will be in this room. If you want to refresh yourself on that, it's in the program, all the details. We've got a lot of great speakers. There's been a lot of work that has gone into this. I asked for a list earlier of all the people I should thank, and I was told, no, it's too long. So I'll just say thanks to my staff in particular, thanks to the people we've hired here, but Rachel Ellis and her team and the comms team and the IT team, everybody, they've just done such great work. So we are going to kick it off this morning the way we kicked off 2023 human trafficking discussion. We kicked that off with Governor Sanders, and we're going to kick off this morning with Governor Sanders. Governor Sanders has been uber active on the issue of social media, speaking out, having discussions with noted experts, shaping policy, legislation, getting the phones out of our schools. She's done so much. We got a lot to talk about. And of course, she's a parent, just like I am. I know I look like a grandparent, guilty, but I'm actually not, still a parent. And I got a 7-year-old. In any event, I know, I've heard all the jokes. In any event, we're going to have a great discussion. So if you would, please help me welcome Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders. She's drinking coffee. I'm drinking water because I've had too much caffeine. It doesn't take much to be too much for me.
I'm already worried that Tim's had 10 cups of coffee this morning. So,
oh my gosh. Well, we work very well together, and part of that is because she puts up with my hyperactivity, and we try to channel that into something productive, something like this. And I appreciate the governor being here. She's been such a leader on this issue. And so I think it's going to be interesting, Governor, to hear your response to some of these questions, because you are approaching it not only as someone who runs the state as the CEO, but is also a parent of relatively young children. And, you know, I've got two, 15, and I've got three total, but two that are in that social media age. And so I've had to make those decisions, just like you have, of when do they get what do they get, how do we monitor all of that stuff. So let me start by just asking you, you know, we all know you've been actively engaged on the social media issue. So when did this first hit your radar? And I'm talking in particular the dangers, the potential harm that can come from social media. When did you first say, hey, this is something we got to do something about?
Sure. First, before we jump in, I want to say thank you to you for hosting this event every year and always leaning into and showing tremendous leadership on issues that impact every single Arkansan. And sometimes there are issues that people don't realize the impact that they're having. And so you do such a great job of highlighting and bringing awareness and bringing people from all over our state and even around the country to talk about things that are really making a difference. And you've been such a leader on this, and I'm really grateful I have the opportunity to serve with you. Having an attorney general that you get to work well with makes a big difference, especially when you're a governor that gets sued a lot. It's nice to have an AG that you work very closely with. And so really thankful for the incredible partnership and leadership that you provide our state and all of the things that we get to work on. In terms of social media, as you mentioned, I'm a parent. I have a 13-year-old, an 11-year-old, and a 10-year-old. So I'm living this all day, every day. In fact, one of the biggest fights we've had at our house is over the phone and whether or not we have access to phones and video games and iPads. And so I'm living it every minute of every day, both as a parent, but also seeing the tremendous impact that unfettered access to social media and smartphones are having on our young people. Over the course of the last several years, we have seen astronomical rises in our suicide rates, our depression, our anxiety. At the same time that those things are skyrocketing, all of our test scores and our engagement in the classroom is plummeting. That's not a good combination. That's the opposite of what we want to see happening in our young people. There's no secret. There is no one that will be surprised to hear that we have a mental health crisis taking place in our country, and social media and smartphones are a huge driver of it. We see it as parents. We see it as government officials. And in a meeting that I had a couple years ago, right after I'd first taken office, we gathered together superintendents from all over the state, from both bigger districts, smaller, just to have kind of an informal conversation, specifically to talk about the impacts of mental health on our students, what they were seeing, what they thought was a big driver. And there was unanimous consensus that not only did we have a problem, but that smartphones and social media were a big part of the driver. And so we set about looking for how do we solve it. I read a book called The Anxious Generation. It is one of the longest standing books on the New York Times bestseller list. There's a guy named Jonathan Haidt. He's an NYU professor. If you look at the two of us on paper, you probably think they don't have a lot in common. There's probably not a good nexus there for the two of them to become friends. However, I read his book and reached out to him because I wanted to learn more. I wanted to understand about the recommendations that he was making. And we had a very quick friendship and have stayed in touch. And because of that, it helped serve as a catalyst for us doing more than just talking about the problem, but what can we do from a state standpoint and from the position as governor to really engage and make a difference. I sent a copy of his book to every governor in the country and to every single member of the Arkansas legislature, both Republicans and Democrats, because this is a bipartisan issue, and it's one of the things that we've seen unite Republicans and Democrats and work closely together on. And we've made a lot of progress, but that was what I would say the beginning stages right after taking office, having that personal experience, but then hearing that direct feedback from people in the education community who were seeing it and feeling it from our young people every day. And then you put the book on top of that. And those were really kind of the combo factors that made me say we have to take a much bigger role and start doing something about what we're watching happen in the country.
How did you learn, how did that book get in front of you? Did you just see it in the media? What brought that book in particular to your attention?
Well, it's interesting. Almost embarrassed to admit, I kind of saw it in two ways. Social media was one part. I saw somebody talking about it on there, but my husband read it first. And he was like, Sarah, you really need to read this. And so he had been looking at it and read through the book before I did, and leaned on me to follow suit and read the book. And I'd seen a couple of interviews that he had done online, and what he was saying really resonated, because as a parent, you feel lost. I think so much of why we have so many kids that are on their phones all the time, and one, I don't think parents knew the dangers. I don't think they understood what they were putting in their kids' hands. And then they felt like they were too far behind and they couldn't catch up. And so because I was dealing with that myself, I'm like, okay, well, if he has some ideas, some solutions, let's look at that. And then it grew into something much bigger than just what can I do in my own home, but what can we do and how do we use this as a way to share this message and make an impact on the state.
Now, was that in your first year as governor, 2023, or was that prior to taking office? I guess the question is, was this awareness, this sense of urgency, this compelling case for action, is that something you brought? I was thinking back, and I think a lot of this was 23. I could be wrong. Was that something you brought to the campaign and then to the office, or is that something you really dove into in your first year?
It's really more the first year. I started talking about it in my own home as I was having that fight with my oldest, my 13-year-old daughter,
Been there.
about the phone. And so that was when the conversation really started, and seeing, you go to their school and you walk down the hallways and nobody's talking to each other, and there's no noise and there's no excitement in cafeterias because everybody's looking down. Kids aren't hanging out after school anymore. They're texting and FaceTiming and calling each other instead of going to one another's houses. So you started to see all of those signs and all of those things happening. And then shortly after getting elected was when we really started to make a shift beyond just the personal experience into a public policy place.
If I remember correctly, because we have been sued a lot.
Just a couple times.
But we've won a whole lot. So if I remember correctly, the social media law that was passed, that was the first general session, right? Senator Dees over here. And that was 2023. So you were already, that was early 23. Was that before you read the book? Where does that fit in? Because I feel like you were already doing with the legislature. We've got Senator Dees up here, who was chief chief driver of the legislation, the Social Media Act, I feel like you were engaged on this issue even in the legislature as governor before that book. And then that book sort of took it to the next level. Is that a fair characterization?
Yeah, I'd say that's fair. And Senator Dees was a key part and helped sponsor the first piece of legislation. He's a parent as well. And so I think a lot of us were feeling it at home. And,
what do we do? And he happens to be a senator.
We were hearing it from our teachers, from our principals, from our superintendents of there is a real problem here and we need to make changes. And so we worked together, and Tyler did an amazing job of helping lead that legislation and get it across the finish line. And again, there was broad support for it, a bipartisan issue, because so many people were experiencing it themselves. This wasn't one of those things that you had to explain to everybody.
Right.
Everybody is living it
Totally.
and seeing it. You know, one of the things that I think is that so many people have experienced, particularly those in any type of public life, if you go on social media, and my recommendation is not to read the comments. It's something I've learned the hard way. People aren't very nice online a lot of the time, and you will look in the comments and you see something that is so aggressive, so intensely attacking you, and you look over at the profile picture and you think it's going to be this mean, angry individual, and it's this sweet grandmother surrounded by all of her grandkids, and you're thinking, she would never say that to me in real life. But people
Hopefully.
have felt emboldened to
Anonymity.
say things, in a way that they never would have before, because of the presence online. And you've seen a huge cultural shift in the way that people engage with one another. And I think everybody had an experience and something that they could point to, and they were seeing it with their kids. They were feeling it in their homes. They were seeing it in their schools, feeling it in their communities. And so there was a lot of support for that first legislative push to require parental permission for students to have a new account online. We weren't saying you couldn't have one. We were simply saying parents should know about it. And it helped us also raise awareness. So parents who weren't paying attention, didn't know the dangers. Now all of a sudden we're talking about it, and more people were engaging in the conversation.
What's interesting, Governor, is, and I think this would apply to Senator Dees as well, a lot of policy issues that public officials tackle, we have no personal experience with, right? We have to get up to speed, and we have to figure it out, and we have to listen to the experiences of other people and figure out, based on other people's experiences, the way forward, right? I've never received a Social Security check, for example. But when I was in Congress, I had to deal with Social Security. I didn't just throw my hands up and say, I haven't experienced it. I would talk to people and figure out, try to put yourself in their shoes. This is different because it sounds like to me that, there are books you read and you're learning the whole time. You're like, I didn't know anything about this. If you give me a book on nuclear physics, I would go to sleep. But when I awakened, I would be like, I'm learning on every page because I know nothing about this. But it sounds like, Governor, with Hate's book, that you were probably just getting confirmation of what you experienced from an experiential standpoint already knew. Sort of an amen on every page. It was confirming what you had already seen. Is that true? And is that part of why you were able to lean in so quickly and go, yeah, this is what I'm seeing in my kids and in my state? Because clearly you were dealing with this before the book.
Yeah, and I think one of the things too that certainly motivated members of our legislature, and Tyler was one of the people that was very aware, but we had a student here in Arkansas, his name was Mason, and in 2022, Mason took his own life. And if you had asked most anyone who knew Mason leading up to the 10 days prior to that horrific thing happening, they would have said he was a happy kid. He was well adjusted. He had a lot of friends. He was not somebody you would look at and think was struggling. And Mason had a breakup. And because of that, he went online and started looking at things on TikTok. What do you do when you're sad? What do you do when you have a breakup? And within 10 days, he was inundated with content walking him through step by step on TikTok on how to take his life. And Mason's mom has so boldly and so courageously shared his story because she didn't want any other parent to have to experience that awful tragedy that her family went through. And because of her bravery, because of her willingness to come out and talk about what their family went through and how quickly it happened and the things that he was exposed to, I think it awakened a lot of us and put a call to action to us. So it wasn't just something that you read about and you saw about, it was something we felt. In Jeannie's story, in talking about what their family had experienced, and it really motivated us to say we can do better for our kids. If nothing else, we can tell Mason's story and help other parents know how dangerous this can be and things that they need to be looking for and be prepared for. And at the same time we were hearing that story, we were reading that book, and it was confirmation that this wasn't an isolated case. This was something that was happening around the country, and things were going to get worse before they got better if we didn't start taking serious action. And again, some of that was simply sounding the alarm and raising awareness, and then letting that be a driver once we brought awareness to the dangers and what was happening, to then taking action and actually changing and impacting policy.
It sounds like, and I think it is reasonable to conclude that the train rolling toward legislation, reform, that was going to happen based on experiences, based on common sense, based on there's got to be a better way, regardless of the book, regardless of the experts. But they helped they helped provide some of the data and some of the factual basis that we need to make the argument, right? It sounds like the train was going regardless. Is there anyone else other than Haight that you would recommend to people here that has really been a leader? I know you're a leader on it. Are there other leaders that you have looked to, other states that you have looked to? And then I want to get into some of the things that you've done. But just if people are looking for things to read, anybody else you would recommend?
Certainly, far and away, I think that the single best and the case that is articulated in the cleanest, easiest way to not only understand but then has practical solutions is The Anxious Generation. Not only because he breaks it down and shows what the problem is and backs it up with statistical information, but then he gives a path forward. I never like a book that just tells me all the things that are wrong. I want somebody who can also help us build a pathway forward, and he does that in a really simplistic way. For a guy who is so brilliant and has such complex thinking and so much detailed research, he simplifies it in a way that you don't have to be an NYU professor to understand it. And I think that's why his book has been so popular and done so well. Others that I think have led on this issue and have really been outspoken and at the forefront, Governor Cox in Utah has been a strong leader and was one of the first, I think, people to really lead legislatively outside of Arkansas. Governor Jared Polis in Colorado has also been somebody who has been very engaged in the process. One of the things that I think was really important and that our partners in the legislature and that we've talked about is we knew that if we came in with a really heavy-handed top-down approach, then passing legislation was going to be really difficult. And so the first thing we did before we even passed legislation was we started a pilot program in the state. And some of the advice we got from Jonathan Haidt was don't just run a program where you take phones out of school, but track its success and really have data to back it up so that you have proof of concept when you go back and want to do something in a bigger, broader scale. So that's exactly what we did. And honestly, we were overwhelmed by the number of schools that participated in our pilot program. So we announced in the early part of last summer, just a little over a year and a half ago, a pilot program that schools could voluntarily opt into to go phone free. And the state would pay for the cost of either the pouches or the lockers to put the phones in, whatever they wanted to use, we would pay for. And we set $2 million aside, and we thought we'd have a handful of schools that would participate. And we partnered with the University of Arkansas to track the success of the program. Not only how many students were participating, but what were the results of the schools who actually utilized going phone free. And frankly, we were overwhelmed. We immediately had to put more money into the bucket for schools to draw from to go phone free. 70% of school districts across Arkansas voluntarily opted into that pilot program. You can't get 70% of school districts to voluntarily opt into anything, but that showed us what a desperate need there was and how much I think our teachers and our principals and our administrators were looking for help and were looking for some assistance on removing cell phones from the classroom. And so it was a wildly successful program. And while that 70% sounds great, the numbers that I think are even a bigger deal is what we saw in the data. After a year, Bentonville West was one of the high schools that we tracked really closely, and they had been one of the earliest adopters of the program. We saw a 57% drop in verbal and physical aggression in that school. 57% drop. A 51% drop in drug usage in that school. We saw an 86% increase in the level of engagement and participation of students in the classroom. I mean, those are startling numbers. For anything to have that big of an impact in 1 year is frankly mind-blowing. And so it gave us the ability to bring that information back to the legislature and then pass legislation that codified what we were already doing and really push those other schools that hadn't yet opted in to adopt that program. And now I'm proud that every single school in the state of Arkansas has gone bell to bell, no cell. And the number of people and teachers and even students that come up and thank us is overwhelming. I mean, I think we will look back 10 years from now and point to that as being one of the single biggest things that we did to change the lives of students growing up in Arkansas. It is making a tremendous difference, and it's something that I think we have to continue to lean into and something that will be a great legacy for all of us who were engaged in it.
Yeah, that's a huge, huge deal. And even though you're focused on Arkansas public schools, it has been a great example for all schools, private schools too, who have followed suit. I don't know what the percentage is, but it's extremely high. And it seems like such a common sense thing. And you sort of look back and go, why was there a time when we didn't do this? I mean, you know, and it was because we heard parents say things like, well, I've got to be able to talk to my kid, you know, in case of emergency. And you're like, well, when I was growing up, there was an emergency, you call the school, right? You call the front office and deal with it. As an aside, and I'm sure they timed it for us, CBS Sunday Morning, I think this last Sunday, they went to a high school in New York that had done the same thing. And their findings on attention span and behavior and interaction and creativity and all of these things, lack of distraction versus distraction, all of it tracks, Governor, what you're saying, all of it. And so that is just a huge, huge deal. And you, by stepping out and just saying, this is what we'll do, it makes all the difference. That's a perfect example of your leadership on this. And I want to make sure we talk about each of these things. So you've mentioned the phone issue and no cell. We've talked briefly about the first 2023 social media law. What other policies? I know we had follow-up legislation. So is there anything else that you want to emphasize in terms of what you, independent or working with the legislature, have done? I know that we've been sued on both the first social media law and I think the second. But
It's good job security.
yes, yeah, hits just keep on coming. But in any event, yeah, are there other things that you want to emphasize before we move on to some other topics?
Sure. I think one of the big pieces that we have to have is, frankly, engagement from the big tech companies. And we're starting to see that more because more and more states are championing these issues and passing legislation, and they're spending millions and millions and millions of dollars fighting us in court. That I think they are starting to have a shift in how they approach and more willing to have conversations about partnering with states and with students to protect them in a bigger way. You're starting to see, if you are listening to ads on Pandora or things like that, I don't know if it's just because they're targeting me specifically, but it's pretty rare that I have a day where I don't hear an ad advertising all of the teen accounts that now exist on social media with more protections and more parental controls. But you're starting to see a shift in the way that they're approaching it. And I think that is going to be a big piece of the puzzle, is having collaboration with big tech and having them come to the table, because ultimately they can put in serious protections on the front end that would do such a great service on the content side, on targeting specific issues, things that we saw, like what happened with Mason, where a young person shouldn't be targeted with that type of content. I think that there is a lot that they can do in this space. I'm cautiously optimistic that they will take on the role that I'm hopeful they will, but I do think that could be a total game changer. If we can get them to come to the table and work with us instead of fight against us, I think it would make a big difference.
Yeah, they're coming to the table. So we were the first state to sue Meta. We were part of a national investigation, and I said that's taken too long. So we sued them individually as our state. That is ongoing litigation, and we are doing. We've just been winning at every turn there. We have two suits against TikTok, and we have been winning there. We have additional suits, and so I think the table will be well populated. And we're having those conversations. I need to tell you that we're going to talk a lot about addiction, algorithms, the dangers of social media. Certainly there are some positives. The governor learned of the book and on social media, and it's not all negative, but the negatives, particularly for young people, are extreme. And I want to just mention, because I told them I would do this, so Meta, with whom we're in litigation, Snapchat, and Roblox have all provided some handouts on parental safety, what have you. I told them in the spirit of fairness that I would make sure those handouts are available, and they will be, maybe as I speak, they will be put at the back, probably near the Chick-fil-A. I don't think you'll get them confused. Please don't. There should be no biscuits wrapped in Roblox. But in any event, they'll be out there. Obviously, you can go to their websites. I haven't reviewed them. I'm not endorsing them, but I am allowing them to provide that information to you. I'm sure 99% of it, if not all of it's available on their website. But they sent some stuff, physical handouts, and it'll be at the back. Let me ask you this, Governor. So it's really interesting. There are very few topics in our business, in the business of politics, where both sides agree, where the middle of the Venn diagram is quite large. You know, I think that I have found from my time in Congress and over the years that one of those where there's a lot of overlap is China. You can find a lot of really strong voices on the perils of China, the Chinese government, both on the right and the left. But even more so, agreement on the social media. You've mentioned this. And if you look at a map, there's the map shown on CBS Sunday Morning of the different states that have taken action from the cell phones, for example. Not every state has. Arkansas is a leader on that. But blue states and red states have. It was interesting that you mentioned Governor Cox of Utah, who a Republican governor, but you also mentioned Jared Polis. Now, had I not served in Congress with Jared Polis, I probably wouldn't know who Jared Polis is. But I knew him before he was governor, and he's pretty left. He's pretty far out there on a number of things. But this is an area where you get parents sharing experiences, parents sharing frustration, leaders from both sides engaging. So I guess my question is, when you look at what the red state or the Republican governors have done in this space and compare it to what some of the Democratic governors have done, sounds like there's some agreement. For example, cell phones in schools. Have you noticed any differences? What have some of the other governors done in this space that maybe we have decided, you've decided not to do? Or is there just a ton of agreement here? Have you had these sort of conversations? I don't know if you bump into Jared, Governor Polis, but can you talk a little bit about that agreement / disagreement with the other side?
Sure. Certainly, we're not always hanging out in the same places, but we do have a decent amount of interaction among other governors, and I think that's one of the big differences that you see in states versus Washington is there's a much better sense of shared practices that take place. And I think we've been one of the most out front and leading states on this issue and have been kind of the model to follow in terms of really leaning into this space, not being afraid of it. But you're seeing a lot of other states that have taken action similar. I think the place that you have the greatest consensus around is removing the cell phones from schools. And one of the guys who is the creator and the CEO of the Yonder Pouch, it's one of the more popular tools that is being used in our schools. They put the phones in the pouch, and it has a special key that the teacher can unlock at the end of the day. And he says something that I really love, and I think a lot of us have adopted on, but we're not taking anything away. We're actually giving them a phone-free education. We're giving them their education back in a way that we should have done a long time ago. I had a teacher that came up to me when I was in a school just a few weeks ago, and she said, I wish I had known the impact that removing the cell phone would have in my classroom, because I would have done it a long time ago. She said, we've never seen any single thing have as big of an impact in a classroom and the success of our students as removing the phone. And so I think there is a wide consensus, both everything from a classroom standpoint to a state leadership, even members in Washington are starting to shift in that way to support removing cell phones from the classroom and giving something back to our kids. I would say that is far and away the greatest area of agreement. The place where you probably have the biggest area of disagreement, and it comes from all sides, is on the content. And that is a really difficult road, because you want to protect free speech, you want to protect the ability for those platforms to exist, but you also, more than anything, you want to protect kids. And, you know, I think social media can be a great tool. It's something I use on a regular basis. I think it's a great way as an elected official to be able to get your message out, to speak directly to the people, to share information. I love keeping up with my friends and seeing what their kids are doing and staying in touch with people that I otherwise probably wouldn't hear from or know anything about.
You're my friend on,
are
we friends on?
We are
social
friends. I see all the places you eat, all of the food that you're having. Tim loves, some people share pictures of their kids. Some people share, you know, black-eyed pea dinners. So it's a mix. Everybody has different things they're into. But it can be a great tool. So I don't want to sit up here and make it sound like I think it is, you know, every part of it is bad, because there are some positive aspects of it and can be utilized in a good way. But the same way, when we were kids, our parents didn't let us watch certain shows and certain movies because we weren't prepared for it. And now we've taken a totally different approach as a society, and we've given our kids a phone that is a gateway to everything the world has to offer. And they are simply not prepared to handle what is being put in their hands. You know, I've heard experts on this topic say, would you invite somebody that you know is a drug dealer into your child's bedroom, a sexual predator into your child's bedroom? Well, of course you wouldn't. Then don't let them have a cell phone and a computer in their bedroom, because that's exactly what you're doing. When they have total gateway to everything that the world has to offer, you're putting it in their hands and you're letting them sit behind a closed door and access it. Our kids were not wired to handle it. And that is, I think, the place where there is a much harder argument, is how do we both protect our kids but also protect freedom of speech and protect people's ability to share what's on their mind, but still protect kids from things that they're simply unprepared to handle. And that's one of the biggest, and I think one of the most challenging, because there is a fine line, but we can do more and we can do a better job on protecting our kids from the dangers that exist.
I do think that the pressure by you speaking out, legislation, all of this combined, the books, the pressure has had an impact on the behavior of the companies. Shame still works, particularly when it impacts money, right? And so that's a tool that I would encourage you to keep using, because your voice has made an impact in helping push people to the table. Have we thought about no cell bell to bell in Congress? Just a joke, my old colleagues.
But a really good idea.
Just a joke, just a joke. I say that because you know, this show that I watched last week, they were talking about the stands at a school gathering, right, where everybody is normally like this, or they're filming everything. And with the phones gone, they were talking to each other and actually watching what was going on. And one of the kids was like, but I mean, years later, we're not going to be able to look back and have the video of everything. And the person said, yeah, but you'll remember actually watching it, you know? So let me ask you this, because I think this is a challenge for a lot of parents. There's sort of this feeling that once you give a child access to an app, a social media app, any app, but particularly social media, that you've sort of broken the seal and you can't go back, or it's difficult, right? Part of that's probably because of addiction, right? I'm addicted to it now. You can't take that, right? Without getting into your personal parenting, have you encountered situations? I know I've had to think through, hey, I gave this app, I thought it was appropriate. It's clearly addictive. And when we take the phone away, the behavior changes. Have you thought about that? And have you had to, I guess I have to sort of ask personally, have you experienced that where you say, I think they're ready for this. They use the app, whether it be Snapchat or whatever, and then you realize, oh my gosh, this is truly addictive, and I might have to sit down and crawfish a little bit.
Yeah, I think it's one of the hardest things that a lot of parents are facing right now is what do we give and when do we give it, and did I already give too much and how do I take it back? And I think one of the best things certainly has helped me, and I'll just speak from a personal standpoint, is don't do it alone. Talk to other parents because they're all dealing with it too. I think so often we are afraid for our kids to be the only one, and that's really hard. Because in some ways you're trying to protect them, but you also don't want them to be totally isolated and left out of everything else that's happening. When we were kids and you didn't get invited to a birthday party, you just didn't get invited. And you moved on, and the next day something else happened. Now you have to relive that moment of not being invited over and over and over again as you see everybody else that went posting pictures and sending it around to a group chat, and you're the only one not there. And that in itself can be really isolating and create a level of anxiety and depression for kids that makes it really hard for them. One of the students that we talked to after a school went phone free, a lot of them didn't like it at first, and some of them still don't. But quite a few have come and said thank you, because you're actually removing some of the pressure on those kids. They don't feel the need to check their phone all day and see did somebody like my post, and they don't have to live 8 hours of knowing all day long that they were the only one that didn't get the video or wasn't part of the group text. And so everybody is doing the same thing, and that is true for parents as well. There's a great organization called Wait Till 8th. And it is a program where parents sign up, and in the sign up, you have to list your name and your child's name and their grade and their school. And when the people in your school in the same grade as your student reach a certain threshold, then they send it out and say, all of these parents have collectively decided together that they're going to wait until the 8th grade to give their kid a phone. And so parents that may not even be in your friend group, you can get connected to and see that you're not by yourself. And I think it's so hard to feel like you're fighting that battle alone. So one, I would encourage you to talk to people in your friend group, talk to other parents, talk to the parents of your kids' friends, because they're having the same questions, the same anxiety, and fighting those same battles. So don't do it by yourself. And two, I would encourage you to engage in things like Wait Till 8th, because it's a great tool and it connects you with people that you may not even know are feeling the same and want to make that same decision. And so it's a really great resource and a good way to build a network of people that are looking to do the same thing so that you're not having to fight that battle on your own.
Awesome, awesome. I think it's clear from talking to the governor that we have the premier gubernatorial leader on this issue. We only have like a minute, so I'm going to ask you just real quickly, is there anything that you haven't done yet? I see the senator over there getting excited, waiting for the legislative session. Is there anything you haven't done yet on social media that you would like to tee up, announce here, think we ought to look at? What's next?
I think it has to be on the content creation side. What that looks like, I really believe strongly that we have to work with big tech to figure out a path on that. But I think it definitely has to be part of the conversation and how we do a better job, both as a government, as parents, as adults, as leaders, of protecting the type of content that is not just accessible, but more importantly, being pushed on our kids and that they're being exposed to, and how we can do a much better job on that front. And so what that looks like, I think those details are still yet to be written, but I think it's going to have to be a collaborative effort of us working together. The other piece is just continuing to use our platform. Everything doesn't have to be legislated. A lot of times
Can be litigated.
Yeah, doesn't always have to be. I think a lot of it is raising awareness, and every single person in this room has a circle of influence, and you have a platform. Just because ours may be a little more public doesn't mean that you don't have a voice and that you shouldn't use it and that you shouldn't be engaging in the biggest way possible in this conversation, whether it's with a small group of friends, or of grandparents or parents, or a church group or some other type of community group that you're part of. You have a voice and you need to use it, and we need everybody to collectively engage, because that's the only way you see a true cultural shift, and that's what we need. We cannot legislate this change. We cannot litigate this change. We can certainly have an impact. We can certainly move it in the right direction, but it will take a collective change and a collective voice to have a true cultural shift. And that's what I believe ultimately we really need. And that's going to take people from every walk of life, every demographic, left, right, Democrat, Republican. Everyone is impacted by this issue. And I think it's going to take everyone leaning in and collectively working on it to solve it.
Perfect last words. Thank you, Governor, for being here. Thank you, Governor, for your leadership. Give her a round of applause. Thank you.
All right,